Today, we become legends.
This time on Titan Talk, they went over the full balance notes for OB16 with a ton of changes to cover, as well as some Q&A at the end. So without further ado, let's jump in. So first up, we have God Balance, with Amaterasu's Aspect 1 getting a buff to its basic attack damage and getting a new effect of 3 to 5% lifesteal based on rank. Ares is getting a nerf to his health regen on his 2, thank God, from 10 to 30 down to 8 to 20. This buff lasts 6 seconds, so this goes from 180 health total down to 120 total at max rank. Bellona is getting a shift where her 1 no longer gains block stacks from non-god targets, but her bludgeon spin damage has been increased. Cerberus is getting a small change where his heads can now be alerted before he puts a point in his 1, so as soon as you hit level 2 and rank up your 1, this will be ready to fire at full power. Hades is getting some changes as well, with the int scaling on his 1 going up from 60% to 75%, as well as some fixes on his 3 that basically amount to buffs. They fixed the ally healing on the 3 only considering item protections, it will now count all protections, and they also fixed his 3's self-heal specifically, not scaling from protections at all when it should have been. The Aspect Hecate non-conquest balance did make it in for this update. Her Aspect 2 will now deal half damage in non-conquest modes. Aspect 2 years being hitting in this update as well. They have decreased the non-marked bounce damage from 50% to 33%, decreased the bounce range from 4.4 meters to 3.2, and decreased the damage bonus on ricochet basic attacks from 40% to 30% per bounce. Hunbats is getting some nerfs as well, with his passive strength going down from 5 to 3 per stack. This is 40 to 32 at level 20 and 20 to 12 at level 1. His 3 is also losing 5% strength scaling. Jingwei is getting some buffs, with her 2's cooldown being decreased from 16 seconds to 14, her 3's cooldown being decreased from 18 flat to 16 scaling down to 14, which is massive for her safety, and her ultimate gets a 15% buff to its strength scaling. Medusa is also getting some buffs, with her 1 strength scaling going up from 6% to 8% per tick, and the attack speed scaling going up from 10% strength to 15. Her 2 and ultimate are also getting 10% more intelligence scaling, so both ways of building Medusa are getting some buffs here. Brahma is also getting some buffs, as he's another underperforming ADC on the current patch. His cooldown refund on his next arrow when basic attacking is going up from 2 seconds to 3, and Astral Strike will now proc this cooldown refund once per shot. They also increased the bonus scaling on Astral Strike from 15% to 20%, and the scaling on Rolling Assault from 40% to 55%. Zeus is getting a shift, with his 2 now providing 10 up to 15% haste based on rank, and his ultimate's base damage is going down, but scaling is going up. That's it for the god balance though. Let's move on to some sorely needed item balance after the big item pass that happened in OB15. First up, Vampiric Shroud is getting some more base health and more health and mana restore. Gilded Arrow is getting 5 more basic attack power. Bumba's Spear is getting 5% more base attack speed. Ancient Signet is getting 2 more base damage per level and a decreased cooldown on its proc from 20 seconds to 15. Bancross Talon is getting 15 more base intelligence but 10 less passive intelligence. Sunbeam Bow and Braggy Tap were not considering Titans for their reduced damage on bosses claws, which they will now do, auto speed and shambles. Contagion is getting a 75 base health nerf and a cost increase from 2250 to 2400. Devos is getting a nerf to its stacks required when past the normal stack limit. It now takes 10 stacks to get 1 instead of 8. It also got a 100 gold cost increase. Heartwood Charm should now properly proc on Aspect's healing abilities. Leviathan Hide's health per stack is being increased from 6 to 8. Lifebinder's base intelligence is being increased from 35 to 50. Regrowth Striders is getting some nerfs, losing 5 base physical protection, 5% movement speed off of the proc, and 1 second off the duration of the movement speed as well. Sanguine Lash is going down from 10% lifesteal to 7.5%, which is a bigger nerf than it seems, since the item gets 1% more max health damage per 10% lifesteal, so this item will now do 1% max health instead of 2. If this is all the lifesteal you have, which is commonly the case right now, you will have to build another lifesteal item to bump this up to the next threshold, which won't actually be 2% anyway, as they are also nerfing the base max health damage from 1% down to 0.75. The item will now also only damage humanoids, which means it won't hit totem anymore, and it got the same change as Sunbeam and Braggy, so it will now properly consider Titans as bosses for the reduced damage output. And finally for items, Transcendence is getting a buff from 30 base strength to 35. They also fixed some tooltip bugs with Transcendence. Moving on though, we did get to hear about the Conquest changes coming on Wednesday's show, but in case you missed it and just to have full details on the changes, I'll cover them quickly here. The totem is changing to no longer give 1 permanent CD CDR, but instead give 10 CDR for 60 seconds on kill and an immediate 15% refund on your active cooldowns. It will also now take half damage from gods outside the radius. The firebrands are being changed as well. The static rocks will no longer spawn, but there are now 3 firebrands instead of 2, and they are less tanky than before. The door into the fire giant pit from solo lane will now also be open until the fire giant spawns to allow solo laners more easy access to the firebrands. That's it for the balance changes coming in OB16 though. Let's move into the Q&A section of the show. First up, chat was asking about a variety of different gods that weren't touched in these notes and how the balance team feels about them at the moment. Chak was first up, and Clumsy said they are aware of him doing quite well at the moment, but they feel like some of the item nerfs in these notes will also affect him, so they're going to keep an eye on that. Heath was next up, and Clumsy said by the metrics she's actually doing just fine. She's not OP or terrible, but he sees the feeling that she can play a bit combo heavy and delete you off of roam route, which can be a bit annoying to play into. Afro was next, and Clumsy said that the Enchanter support style of play is actually doing just fine, and they are probably looking at addressing bruises and self-healing more than team healers like Afro and Yamoja right now. Callie was brought up, and Clumsy said she's also doing just fine, not too crazy. He mentioned that self-healers like Callie and Pele are pretty hard to nail down in terms of balance, but they are keeping an eye on them, and some of the item changes in this update will affect them as well. Aladdin was talked about next, and Clumsy said that he is one of the few unique cases of a very high skill ceiling god that can perform well at higher levels of play, but terribly at lower levels, so they have to be a bit more careful and deliberate with their nerfs to these kind of characters, trying to find some way to make them weaker in the hands of a good player but not weaker in the hands of the average player can be hard to do, but they are open to nerfing these gods, and historically they have leaned on keeping them under the point of balance for the average player so that they don't break the game at a high level. Mordred was mentioned, and Clumsy said he's doing just well, but not anything too crazy compared to most other warriors. Ulla was also mentioned, and Clumsy said he's just doing okay, if anything a little underpowered, but that's generally how people like him to be, as an OP Ulla is very frustrating to play against. And finally, we have Odin, who Clumsy said is doing pretty well right now, but with the healing and lifesteal nerfs in this patch, as well as people just generally using the new items less over time as they become less novel, they would expect his prominence to decrease anyway, and thus didn't feel nerfs were necessary. Moving on though, someone asked Clumsy if there are any plans for mid-intelligence itemization, and he said there's always more they could do for sure for every role to be honest, but most of their design time at the moment is focused on conquest changes, not more new items. Someone asked if they could increase the ward duration, and Clumsy somewhat jokingly said that players need to start buying wards before they consider increasing their duration, but on a more serious note, he said that vision and wards are a fairly delicate balancing act, and more vision isn't always good. It can lead to very slow metas where no one goes for ganks or objectives because they can just be seen at all times, but they are always open to making wards and vision feel better, such as the additions of Cyclops Ward and Eyes of the Jungle a while back. Someone asked why they aren't doing any brand new gods, and Kilgoon said they absolutely aren't doing no brand new gods, just slowing down on them to focus more on god ports, as that seems to be what the community wants the most at the moment, with a lot of players stating their main reason for not playing Smite 2 as their favorite god isn't in yet. They also want new gods to be more of a big deal and have some kind of bigger patch and theme around their release to drum up some hype, rather than just dropping them in random patch number 32 like they were doing before. They said specifically that Barry's release basically did nothing in terms of hype and bringing players back because she was just dropped out of nowhere in a regular patch. He did say there are 2 brand new gods currently being worked on, but it's more so a little bit here and there in the background, not a full production process on them at the moment. Someone asked about the Cuckoo aspect that was leaked on the flash test, and Clumsy said not to read into that too much, it won't be the next aspect or anything like that, but he was working on something for Cuckoo a while back and he is on the radar for getting an aspect. Someone asked if they could let you quick play against real players and not just bots, and Kilgoon said at some point they could definitely do that, but right now their focus is on making it as good as it can be for brand new players, and playing against bots has proven to be better than real players for those just starting out. They want to refine the quick play experience and get quick play conquest out, which will come after they're done with their conquest arc of changes that they're working on right now. After that, they could consider doing something like PvP quick play. There was a question on what the team thinks they need to do to get any remaining Smite 1 players to make the move to Smite 2, and Kilgoon said it's a variety of things. Some simply will never move over, whether that's because they're on old hardware or are very attached to their skins in Smite 1 or whatever, but as Smite 2 gets more and more things that Smite 1 doesn't have, and as all the gods eventually get ported over, people will make the move over time when they feel like the game is good enough and their favorite gods are there. Some players are also likely checked out of the game and waiting for some kind of marketing push or full release moment to give them an excuse to come back and check the game out again. He feels they're not ready for that yet, but when the full release date does come around, they feel like a lot of players who either checked out of Smite 2 early on or never played it at all will come back and try the game. They just need to make sure the game is in a good state by that point to make sure those players stick around. Someone asked if they would do some more risk reward or drawback items like Necronomicon and Reaper, and Clumsy said they love the idea of these items, but they have to be implemented selected carefully and probably kept under the point of balance for the most part, as if these kinds of items are top tier and everyone has them every game, it leads to a very unhealthy, snowbally, one-sided kind of meta. And finally, someone asked if Yorm will be able to use Sunbeam Bow and other similar items, and Clumsy said they are working on getting the tech in for reduced effectiveness on item procs for gods like Yorm, but it's actually a pretty hard thing to implement, so they're not sure if it will make it in for when Yorm ships, but the long-term goal is for that tech to be in the game. But that's everything discussed on the show. Don't forget to drop a like before you leave, and I'll catch you guys for another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.